talking about adding fluid to the reservoir, again, keep in mind that this would need to be done at temperature if possible, because what happens as we heat the oil up? Thermal expansion, correct. So as that's expanding, we want to make sure that we fill it at temperature. If we were to go ahead and fill our reservoir all the way to the full mark when it's cold, and then we operate, what might happen? Overfill the reservoir, push all that oil possibly out through the breather. That's going to then create saturation to your breather, collect more dirt, debris on that as you're exchanging air in and out of the reservoir. So just kind of keep that in mind as you go through. Ideally, you would have where during normal operation, I think we talked about this the other day when we were talking about the function of the reservoir. Ideally, we would always have that fluid level within the sight glass. So you could look at any point in time, operate the machine to say, okay, here I'm at my maximum level based on that differential volume that we talked about when we were talking about functionality of the reservoir. As it dips down, we could still see that within the reservoir. A lot of times in the industrial applications that you guys are exposed to, you probably can do that. When you look at comparatively to the mobile world, that's where you start the machine, extend the cylinder. Now that fluid level is more than likely below the sight glass and you have no indication or idea where the fluid level is. One thing that I know just from different locations, different operations that I've seen used as probably a good practice as well, if you have in your industrial setting, if you have that large reservoir and you can see the fluid level always within the sight glass, mark where you have the maximum. That's your normal operating range. But if you do operate and you warm the oil up, maybe put a note where you are normally running when you're at temperature. And the reason for that is you can use that to your advantage when you're troubleshooting. If you notice that the machine's starting to overheat, or maybe it's not even getting quite to that point that you're setting off any alarms, you can look at your reservoir and see this is where your normal at temperature operating level is. And you look at the sight glass and we're slightly above that. That may mean that you're starting to overheat the system, overheat the machine, and now you're starting to thermally expand that oil a little bit further, and you can use that as your reference to help you in kind of the troubleshooting and the maintenance section. When you are checking the fluid, check it with all of the cylinders retracted, making sure that we do that with them fully retracted so that we are measuring what our actual fluid is. Again, just an experience of some of the testing that I had done. You had a small power unit. That power unit may have only held a small volume of fluid. We fill that up and use a lot of that to fill the cylinder, but if we filled it with the cylinder extended and we have a double acting cylinder and retract it back in, same kind of deal as if you fill it when it's cold. We're going to potentially overfill the reservoir, push that oil out through the breather. So just keep that in mind as you're going through. Again, make sure that you're operating, don't overfill it. The other big thing is keep in mind to check your fluid type. Make sure you're applying the correct fluids. Some fluids are not compatible with one another, especially if you guys are working with a customer. Let's say you have a power unit that you sell to a customer and then they're doing the top off. Make sure they know what their allowable fluids are that they can use to top that off, because if they put the wrong fluid in, if you have a different viscosity fluid, we may then lead to other problems, possibly fail the pump. Making sure it's the right viscosity, and again, check with the manufacturer or the operator's manual to make sure that it's within those specs. In your guys' role here, I would say with what you're doing, you may have to list out what that is as far as the acceptable fluid types that can be utilized by your customers whenever they're using that at their facility, to know what is compatible, what can be placed into the machine. And what did we say the other day about cleanliness? New fluid, is it clean? No. Okay? Keep that in mind, that especially when you're dealing with 55-gallon drums of oil, if you're using that as your method to fill a reservoir, Best practice is to pre-filter the fluid, making sure that it's clean fluid that you're putting in. Studies have shown that if you take a 55-gallon drum, look at the cleanliness level, more than likely it's going to exceed almost every component in your machine for recommended cleanliness level, based on the fact that new oil is not clean oil. Other thing is, operating with low oil can damage the pump. What did we say the other day? We were talking about two different characteristics that can occur within a pump. If we draw the fluid too low, what may that lead to? We talked about cavitation and aeration. Which one would this lead to? Aeration, correct, because if we draw it too low and we're pulling a lot of oil into the pump, it can start to create that vortex. We can draw that free air in, we can aerate the pump and cause the damage. This graphic was put together just to kind of show and re-highlight the fact that we don't want to just dump any old oil into a reservoir, pre-clean it. That's the biggest thing. Filter it ahead of time. One of the things that can be used to an advantage, and I think you guys had talked about having those or maybe even putting those together or recommending those to customers, filter carts. Filter carts can be utilized as your method to refill a reservoir or transfer the fluid. We can pull that from a drum or a tote, drive that through the pump into your filters, through the filter cart, and then into the reservoir to allow you that ability to do the pre-filtering of your fluid.
To recap, in summary, the fluid level is checked at operating temperature in the case of a typical hydraulic reservoir, either with a sight gauge or a dipstick in a small reservoir or gearbox. When filling the reservoir, do not fill to the full mark when the machine is cold. This may cause overflow when the machine warms up. Check the fluid level with actuators retracted. The differential volume from cylinders can account for a large amount of oil. If the machine uses an accumulator, hydraulic fluid should be drained to the reservoir prior to checking the fluid level. Accumulators also attribute to the differential volume. Adding the correct fluid and in the right amount is important because many fluids are not compatible with each other. Always check with the manufacturer or machine operator's manual for specifications. Best practices recommend to use pre-filtered hydraulic fluid or to filter during the fill process. New oil is not always clean oil. Operating with low oil in the reservoir can damage the pump.